I liked this because this is about Pipkins. This is also about Ferrero Rocher voiceovers.
Oh.
And I'm absolutely delighted to have commandeered the ultimate guest for that. Please welcome to the studio voiceover artist, Ferrero Rocher expert, and Pipkins presenter, Jonathan Kydd.
Thank you.
Jonathan's in the studio.
What a joy to be on your programme.
Oh, it's terrific to have you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, listen, it's just the start.
Hey, but on my obit, it will say, regardless of anything else I've ever done, it will say, known for Pipkins. You know how they reduce everything to one single sentence for what you've done, despite the fact that I did it 40 years ago. I don't even want to think about it.
But it's okay.
But it's classic. It's possibly the only hit I've ever had. It's classic children's television.
It is. It was a beautiful show.
Everybody hates the hair. Hearty hair. What an incredible impression.
Well, you know, it goes back to my childhood, and Jonathan, I remember the presenter before you, Jonny.
Jay.
Now, Jonny looked, and there was a Mr. Pipkins who was a very
unfortunately,
man.
Yes, he was a very well-known actor whose name, of course, escapes me.
Right, so he was in the original show.
He died on the job, unfortunately.
I know,
yes.
and Jonny...
Woodbridge, his name. George Woodbridge.
Okay, lovely man. Yeah. Looked a bit like David Nixon, the comedian. He was a balding, very old man.
Yes.
And it was a delightful show, and I could have only been about 7 or 8, and Jonny looks at the camera and literally says, and I remember this being 9, and he went, unfortunately, Mr. Pipkins died. And I knew what that meant, because my uncle had just died, and I remember it being such a shock, and I remember him addressing it. But that really happened.
They liked all of that, because each story actually had a kind of moral principle going on in it. It was very cleverly written. They had some very good... There's a very good writer called Gail Renard, who's still a dear friend of mine. Do you know Gail? Seriously?
I do know Gail,
yes. She wrote lots of those with another writer called Susan Pleat, and they had these big meetings about what message was going to be portrayed in it.
I think that was one of the iconic moments of children's television where Jonny looked at the camera and said, unfortunately, Mr. Pipkins died. They didn't hide it from us. And I do remember the shock of him. Oh, does that mean we're not going to see that man again? What a shock. Anyway, but
by the way, when I left, I went to the circus. But that was the way they got rid of me.
Did they? Well, thank goodness you're here. That's all I can say. But also, I've got a bone to pick with Pipkins.
Oh, yeah.
Because basically, they put the cause of brumminess to the sword for years, and apparently we were all thick from then on. Pig! That was his pig, right?
He spoke like that
Pig
all
was
the way
from Birmingham, right? Oh, Pig!
That's right.
And I thought, Oi, I'm not a pig, but I'm from Birmingham, and I must tell you something, right? Being from Birmingham, the last thing that we am is thick.
But
we're not
it goes
thick.
With it. There are lots of characters who speak a lot like that, you know. Yeah,
oh, now, I won't have a bar of it. We are resourceful, we're not thick.
But look, Jonny, let's be frank. Jonny, let's be frank. The tones of the accent.
Oh, come on.
They go with being slightly dour, don't they? Come on.
It's dour, but it's real. It's real.
Dour. Let's call the whole thing off.
Dour. But it's people from Birmingham are pragmatic and real. And like, I'll give you an example. Bernard was my barber, right? And Bernard was like in his 30s, and I was like 9, and he supported Birmingham City. So that's not funny.
Not Villa.
No, not Villa, not the great Villa.
Hey.
No, he was a bit dour. Of course, he would be supporting Blues. It's just not easy. And what all Brummies did in the 70s and 80s, right, and maybe even afterwards. Pardon?
Robbie Savage played for them.
Savage did, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, and indeed, that's why I said.
So he's going right, and you know, that's not funny. You know, it's not funny. But right, what all Brummies did. What Brummies did, you know, like, if you go to Liverpool or Manchester, and they go, yeah, funny, mate, yeah. No, whereas in Birmingham, right, if they heard a joke, if all Brummies heard a joke of a certain age, they go, that's it. I recognise that's funny, but I'm not going to laugh. That's it. That's it, John, that's it.
But it's maintaining the stereotype a bit, though, isn't it?
No, well, I don't think.
Okay, sorry, I've offended you, I didn't mean to.
Not at all. Not at all. Let's continue.
Can we? Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Ferrero Rocher, what's all that? All I remember is the French woman in there going, ambassador's residence.
Yeah, but she was an actress called Eve Karp, who was a dear friend of mine. She wasn't a French woman.
So what did you do? You knew Ferrero Rocher?
I've actually written it down, because I can never remember it. But I've actually written it down. It goes, the ambassador's receptions are noted in society for his exquisite taste that captivates. Right, we're going to play the advert, Jonny, and you're going to play this. You'll notice the pitch is different. My voice.
You've got a bit older. Yeah.
I've got very old.
Okay, cue Ferrero Rocher.
The ambassadors' receptions are noted in society for their host's exquisite taste that captivates his guests. Ferrero Rocher, a taste sensation, rich, luxurious, unique.
Excelente.
Monsieur, with Ferrero Rocher, you're really spoiling us.
Ferrero Rocher, a sign of good taste.
And they bizarrely say to me, Excelente. And I want to say, actually, that was me doing that.
So you did Italian too?
Oh, hey.
Did you get a lira upgrade?
Funnily enough, no, I didn't. But in fact, all I got was a lot of grief for doing that ad, actually. Because it was possibly the worst ad ever made, wasn't it? I mean, it could never be any good.
It's one of the most iconic.
Pan-European, and it was dubbed, and none of the words fitted, because it was a foreign commercial. So why was it ever a problem? But at the time, people were saying, oh, it's appalling, it's dreadful. All it was we just dubbed bits that didn't really fit.
How lovely. And what I should say is, other chocolate is available, particularly chocolate made in Birmingham, Cadbury chocolate, I should say. Now, so look, you come from a family of thespians, of actors. And
well, no, just one.
Well, you know, I'm going to big it up. Be a good boy, Sam.
My mother, having said that, my mother's side of the family were terrifically to do with the business.
There you go.
Yeah, but that's why I said my dad, you didn't know that at all. But no, you didn't. But my dad was from an army family, and my dad was for those obviously viewers. My dad was a very well-known actor. Died in 1982, called Sam Kidd. He was in over 290 plus films.
Wow.
And 119 between 1945 and 52. Hundreds and hundreds of tellies, worked in comedy and drama, played lots of characters like that because he'd learnt the accent, didn't speak that way at all.
Was he posh?
No, he was like me. He went to
just a regular guy.
Dunstable Grammar, yeah.
Right.
And but he said lots of characters like that because his mother spoke like that all the time. So and the family lived in Chiswick, so they all went. And he had an uncle who they hated him being an actor when he first started.
Really,
bringing the family to disrespect for the family. And the uncle had that posh Belfast accent, was terribly like that all the time, you know. And he was in a film called Passport to Pimlico, my dad, and he had an enormous.
This is where they declared independence.
That's right, because there was a bomb and it blew up, and they found a niche that said that the whole place actually belonged to Burgundy in France, so they declared independence. And at the beginning, he was the sapper, and he had this enormous tattoo. And his uncle, who hated him being an actor, they wanted him to get a proper job, said, "I see you have a tattoo now." He said, "How could you stoop so low?" he said, and that was sort of confirming his feeling that my father was a ne'er-do-well and it was a wastrel, it was all going to fall apart for him. And my father said, "Actually, Jack, it's a tattoo." And he went, "Oh, okay," and just slightly disgruntled, disappeared. But the family, his mother, all the way through, even when he was a huge star, my dad. I mean, we used to go to football at Chelsea. I'm so sorry, but because you're being a Villa fan, a villain, in fact.
I am a villain.
You're a villain, yeah. We'd go, and he would be mobbed because there was a period when he was on Crane, which was a TV programme about where he played one of the leads, and it was a smuggling thing set in Morocco with Patrick Allen, the Barrett Holmes guy, originally.
With the boys.
He'd be surrounded by hundreds of people saying, "It's Sam Kidd, it's Sam Kidd." He'd always say to me the words, always say with me, "Keep close, keep close, keep close," in case I got lost, because I was 8 or 9 and going with him, holding his hand, and he'd then let me go onto the terraces while he had his season ticket in the East Stand. So
this is wonderful. So this is Jonathan Kidd, and he knows so much about his dad because he's writing an autobiography.
Oh, yes, I didn't tell you that.
No, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to take a short commercial break and pay the housekeeping, and Jonathan Kidd will be back with a multitude of stories from a wonderful world of cinema and entertainment about his father, about himself. Sam Kidd, Jonathan Kidd's in the studio. This is Talk TV. So what I've found out is that Jonathan Kidd, my current guest, says Johnny Gould on Talk Radio and Talk TV. So there. And here he is in the studio, so you can do it again.
Johnny Gould on Talk Radio and Talk TV.
There's a good argument for listening.
Hey.
Cheers. Merry Christmas. Phil, and Happy Hanukkah. Phil Dave, who's working behind the desk, and you know Phil because he's on air here as well. He does early breakfast from time to time. He's just, well, I've managed to snatch this off him. It's like taking candy off a kid.
And unfortunately, I only have a coffee because cheapskate.
Yeah, because well, you know, we need to keep discipline amongst our guests.
That's true, actually. It's true. I would get
right. Well, that's sort of me. Well, hey, I'm a bit of a bit of a lightweight. Now, look, so Be a Good Boy, Sam.
Yes.
It's a book. You edited the autobiography, which you found in your mum's loft.
Well, I found an autobiography that he wrote. And my mother had kept all the archive.
How beautiful. And so it's a rewritten version, it's updated, about the fantastic career of your father. It's the first volume. And wow, because Sam, your father, holds the record for the most film appearances by a British actor. You mentioned it before the break, 290 movies, including BAFTA-winning I'm All Right, Jack, Peter Sellers, of course, A Reach for the Sky, Oscar-winning 7 Days to Noon, Passport to Pimlico we read, Steptoe and Son Right Again. I saw them last night on that lovely show with the two children, the two babies. Beautiful, beautiful comedy. Till Death Us Do Part, The Cockleshell Heroes, Dunkirk,
Captive Heart, Made Me a Fugitive, Fortune Lane. I have to get a list here, there are so many. Scott of the Antarctic, where there's a lovely story about the cat in there, which put a stop to filming for half the day because it got stuck under under the boat, the fake boat. Stop Press Girl, which was on Talking Pictures TV this week. Hard to Be Good with his great friend Jimmy Hanley, as was. Lovely scene in that. Blue Lamp, Jack Warner. And he then ended up being in 11 Dixon of Dock Greens on the telly as 11 different crooks with the Heart of Gold, because Jack Warner was a mate.
And I must ask this as well, because he was famous enough to be a guest of Eamon Andrews' This Is Your Life.
Indeed.
And you must have remembered it. You must have been a little boy then.
And I was on it, actually.
At the end, where they all walked to the front.
Yes.
And you were there amongst them.
Hey, I was there amongst them. In fact,
how beautiful was that? And he had no idea. Did you know?
No, he didn't know. He didn't know. The problem with This Is Your Life, as you probably know, it's a programme. So all the people my mother wanted to be guests, they said things like, "Oh no, they were on last week," or they go, "No, you can't have him because he was on 3 weeks ago." So my dad was a great mate of Eric Sykes. Couldn't get him.
Oh, shame.
Harry Worth, big chum. Lots of Harry Worth. My dad flitted between comedy and drama, so it was all these things. Worked with Benny Hill. Wanted him on. No. Wanted Arthur Askey. Big mate. No, he was on recently. So in the end, it was pared down to, all right, we got Jack Warner came on. Hey, good stuff. They were big mates. They'd started off in 1945 in Captive Heart. Very big, but who else was on it? But anyway, it was, yes, it was a great celebration, but ultimately, with my critical eye looking at it, I'd have liked it to have been populated with his mates. The two Crane boys came on, Patrick Allen and Gerald Flood. That was good.
Right.
And Jim Laker came on, but made a disparaging remark about his ability as a cricketer. My dad was quite good. And so I actually had it altered. I said, excuse me, because they played all the things. Could you not say that my dad's not very good at cricket?
Fair play you.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So basically, the reason why you've edited is because you absolutely adored your dad.
Well, it's a difficult story. When you go into it, I had no idea about lots of what my dad did because I wasn't alive. And my mother kept
Was he a lot older than you? Was he an old dad?
He was an old dad.
Yes.
Yeah, he had me when he was 40.
Right.
Yeah. As my mother had me when she was 39.
Right.
So yeah, but at the same time, he played football, he played cricket, and I didn't treat him as he's a film star, he's a TV star. It went over my head completely. He was just my dad.
Yeah,
and consequently, I didn't appreciate him enough. But particularly this period, the Talking Pictures allowed me to see all these films. He's really good. This is one of the main things. You look and go, he's a really good actor, and he's on all the time. But all these films, I wish they could show lots of his tellies. They've been wiped. They've all been wiped.
Have they really?
Yeah, nearly all of them, black and white. So yeah, Messmate, 76 episodes, 1960, gone.
Is
Crane,
he on Talking
Crane,
TV?
Orlando,
Pictures.
Talking Pictures. Yeah.
Is he on there?
He's on there on films all the time. Yeah, I've actually done a couple of programs talking about his brilliance of the fact he's on all the time. I just rediscovered him as a dad, and in actual fact, I'm ashamed that I never asked him so much about his Now, he wrote another book called For You the War Is Over.
Yes.
Which I am republishing, which I would have had out before Christmas, but for formatting problems, which is about his time as a POW, and this sold 50,000 in 1973.
Wow.
And
so he was a really big household name.
Oh, unbelievable. He was, as I say, mobbed frequently. He was in a thing, when he did a COI thing about being Fred the burglar, who was saying, make sure you leave your doors open, make sure you leave your milk out, and I'll come round. taxi drivers, stop him in the car.
Yeah.
Here, Fred, don't bogle my house, mate. All of that. I mean, he was just, people used to come up and shake his hand and say, you have made, I love your work so much. You make me feel great. And that aspect of it has stayed with me all the time.
How lovely.
It's a joy meeting you, all of that. Never here, you're that bloke. Occasionally people would say, hey, it's Sid James. My dad would go, no, it's not actually. But,
This is the thing, and I get older, and I see people who were extremely famous when I was younger, who not disappear, but sort of become less well known because their legacy isn't maintained. Because the current generation is so obsessed with the here and now and not legacy. I'll give you an example. When I was a little boy, and when you were a little boy, BBC Two, always in the evening, Laurel and Hardy. For some reason, they have decided to stop showing Laurel and Hardy, and so they are literally disappearing out of the consciousness of people. Whereas when we were kids, even though they were long past and long gone away, and even that their comedy was probably dated, they were on the TV all the time, and now they're not.
Same with the Marx Brothers.
Yes.
All those films that they show
So
regularly.
clever.
But actually, to be fair to Talking Picture TV, they show the Laurel and Hardys all the time.
Yes, they do.
But they're preaching to a committed audience.
And so that's the thing. We are in echo chambers now.
Yeah.
Media used to be slightly more universal. The idea of the family show virtually doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I think they're showing the Scottish thing, the sitcom. There are no sitcoms on telly at the moment, if you notice.
Really?
There are hardly any at all. No scripted, because they're too expensive. You have to employ a writer, and it's a bit hit and miss.
Shame.
And you've got to employ, but really, well, it's easier to get members of the public to make shows and then make them funny with post-production, or just even hope that the premise is funny in the first place. And that's pushed that all away, unfortunately.
Because then you see the art, as I did last night when I happened to see Steptoe and Son.
Oh.
These guys could really act.
Yeah.
And there's no place for that anymore.
No. I think, but it's unfortunately it's moving into other aspects of the medium. I went to see a pantomime last night, and nobody could time a joke.
Really?
Yeah. You just think it's because you don't have that in your wardrobe. You don't have that in your suitcase of experience. It's all out there, but you haven't honed your craft in any way. You know?
So eventually you did get old enough to realise who your dad was.
Yes.
What kind of memories do you have later on, when he was a star, perhaps later on in his career?
He started getting ill, unfortunately. He had emphysema. And because as with everybody, he smoked 60 a day, and he'd been a prisoner of war, where cigarette was a form of barter and a form of friendship. You all shared cigarettes, and he unfortunately it took its toll. With nearly all his contemporaries, all died in their 60s. And whether that was smoking, whether that was the stress of going through a world war, which I think people must take into consideration.
I'm sure.
So it was a little bit difficult, and that's why I fell slightly out of love with him, because he wasn't himself at all the last few years of his life, particularly even in his acting. He became a bit of he was in Coronation Street for the last few years of his life, and he became a bit of a leaning actor because he couldn't breathe properly. And I found that very difficult. This is why finding all the archive. My mother kept everything in the loft, everything, whole desk full of his stuff, all his jokes. The original autobiography wasn't terribly good, because it would say things like, did a sketch with Harry Seacombe. He did a tour with Harry Seacombe in 1946 in Germany, became big mates, got a Christmas card from him every year, as with Jack Warner, and he'd say and it would say, did a great sketch with Harry Seacombe. Nothing in the autobiography. That was it. Great. And I go, Father, what was the sketch? And I found the sketch in his joke book, because he had a joke book, because he'd been a stand-up before the war.
Wow.
And he'd worked with Bud Flanagan. He'd worked with Oscar Rabin Band at the Hammersmith Palais. I didn't know these things. So all of this has been an enormous adventure, and has actually allowed me to really appreciate him much more. And I wish now that I'd been able to question him, talk to him about all of these things, and I wish he'd been around to help me as a performer and an actor, because he wasn't. He saw me in a fringe show I did at the Edinburgh Festival, and he actually said to me, when we came down to London, he said, I didn't think you could be as funny as that, he said to me. And so that was, and he died a couple of months later. So it's all slightly not heartbreaking, but one is emotionally involved in the progress. And I've got another book of his coming out, Never Mind the Acting, Say the Words, which will be out after this next one, Few the War is Over. And then I've got another one coming out, which is Crane and Orlando and much more. That'll be the third one. And the fourth one I then have to write from notes and his diaries. I've got all his diaries, all his letters.
I'm very touched that you go into such detail about your father's life, because you obviously miss him, and I suppose the regret is that you were too young to really appreciate him.
Absolutely.
If he'd been your dad from the age of 25, you'd have 15 more exciting years as an adult with him. Yeah. But that's life. That's the way it goes. I'm an old dad as well, so I'm doing lots of things to try and get them to remember me.
We'd also try to just keep fit,
keep on going on it. Less of this mocha chocolate doesn't look very healthy. Jonathan Kidd, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's been fantastic to be on the show, Jonny.
Pipkins presenter, Ferrero Rocher voiceover artist, and Chelsea podcaster.
Yeah, Chelsea Fancast, do that twice a week.
Do that and have a go. Up the Chelsea as it goes, and good luck with Graham Potter.
Hey, you and him both. Good face. I like it. Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly.
I thought Thomas Tuchel was...
Relegation this year.
I'm not sure. We're down to European Champions a couple of years ago. Anyway, Jonathan Kidd, thank you very much. What a lovely guest that has been. Thank you very much to Jonathan Kidd.